tech billionaire breaks down after housekeeper who rescued him delivers his twins. He was worth $50 million, but the woman who saved his life didn't care about his money. She cared that he was dying. Picture this: a tech billionaire lying unconscious in a pool of his own blood, and the housekeeper he barely noticed becomes the only thing standing between him and death. She rushes him to the hospital, nurses him back to health, and then he falls in love with her. They share one passionate night that changes everything. But the next morning, he pushes her away. What could be his reasons for pushing her after a night of heartfelt intimacy? Welcome back to Mr. William Chronicles, where life's greatest lessons unfold through the power of story. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Hit that subscribe button right now. It helps us bring these transformative stories to the world. If you've ever pushed someone away because you were too afraid to love them, or if you've ever had to raise a child alone when you deserved a partner, hit that like button right now and comment below. Because today's story is about a housekeeper who saved a billionaire's life but couldn't save his heart, and a man who had to face the family he abandoned before he ever knew they existed. This is the story of how second chances require courage, and how love is always worth the risk. Garrett Pierce stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown Chicago penthouse, staring at the November skyline without really seeing it. At 38, he had everything the world said mattered: a cybersecurity empire protecting half of Silicon Valley, a $12 million loft that had been featured in Architectural Digest, and a bank account that grew 7 figures while he slept. But the penthouse felt like a tomb. Success had cost him everything soft. Relationships withered under the weight of his neglect. Friendships faded into networking events where people wanted his money, not his company. The last woman who truly loved him had walked away 3 years ago, tired of playing second fiddle to his ambition. He'd watched her leave and went right back to his laptop. Work was safer than feeling. Tonight, exhaustion pressed down on him like a physical weight. 43 hours. That's how long he'd been awake, managing a security breach that threatened his biggest client. His head pounded with a migraine that made his vision blur. The half-eaten Thai food container on his glass desk had been sitting there since yesterday. Or was it the day before? Time had become meaningless. His phone buzzed. Another crisis. Another fire to put out. Garrett reached for it, and suddenly the room tilted sideways. His knees buckled. The phone clattered to the floor. Garrett's temple cracked against the marble counter with a sickening thud, and then he was falling. The city lights spinning into darkness. He never heard the key turn in the lock. Sienna Hayes had been cleaning Garrett Pierce's penthouse every Tuesday and Thursday evening for 6 months. She arrived at 7:30 after her shift at the hospital cafeteria ended, and spent 3 hours making his space immaculate. The job helped cover her daughter's ballet lessons and kept the lights on in their small apartment across town. At 29, Sienna knew exhaustion intimately. 2 years ago, her husband had died in a construction accident, leaving her with a 3-year-old daughter and a mountain of medical debt. She dropped out of nursing school just 1 semester from finishing to work multiple jobs. The cleaning gig paid well, and the hours worked around Maya's bedtime. She'd noticed things about Garrett Pierce. The untouched meals accumulating in his trash. Prescription bottles for migraines and sleep aids lined up like soldiers on his bathroom counter. The way he looked through her rather than at her, as if she were part of the furniture. He was drowning, and nobody seemed to notice. Tonight, something felt wrong the moment she stepped off the elevator. "Mr. Pierce." Her voice cut through the unusual silence. The penthouse door was slightly ajar. He always closed it. Her heart rate kicked up. "Mr. Pierce, it's Sienna." Then she saw him, sprawled on the glossy marble floor, one arm stretched toward the wall phone, as if he'd tried to call for help. Blood pooled beneath his head, dark and terrifying against the white stone. Oh God! Sienna dropped her cleaning supplies and ran. Training took over. Those 2 years of nursing school weren't wasted. She dropped to her knees beside him, fingers finding the pulse point on his neck. Weak, erratic. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. giving the address in a voice that sounded calmer than she felt. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing a clean towel from her supplies to the gash on his temple. Blood soaked through immediately. She applied more pressure. "Come on, Mr. Pierce. Stay with me." His eyelids fluttered. Unfocused eyes found her face, confused and afraid. "Sienna." His voice was barely audible. "I'm here." She kept pressure on the wound, her other hand finding his. "Help is coming. Just hold on." In the ambulance, sirens wailing through Chicago streets, Garrett kept pulling at the oxygen mask. His hand gripped her sleeve with desperate strength. "Don't leave." The words came out muffled, terrified. Sienna's heart constricted. In that moment, he wasn't the powerful CEO who barely acknowledged her existence. He was just a man, vulnerable and afraid and utterly alone. She wrapped both hands around his. "I'm right here," she promised, leaning close so he could hear her over the sirens. "You're not alone. I'm not going anywhere." Those words, "you're not alone," seemed to reach him through the haze. His grip loosened slightly, his breathing steadied. He closed his eyes, holding onto her voice like a lifeline. When had anyone last said that to him? The fluorescent lights of Atlanta General Hospital's ER cast harsh shadows across Garrett's face as the doctor delivered his verdict. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, so extreme his organs had begun shutting down. Cardiac arrhythmia, his heart literally skipping beats from stress. A concussion that could have killed him if he'd been alone much longer. "Mr. Pierce, you are working yourself to death," the doctor said bluntly. "Literally. Another few hours, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Garrett stared at the ceiling tiles, and for pumping fluids into his arm, monitors beeping their steady rhythm. He'd built an empire by pushing harder than everyone else, by sacrificing sleep and meals and relationships for success. And it had nearly killed him. "Is there family we can call?" the nurse asked gently. "No." The word came out flat. His mother had died 5 years ago, cancer that ravaged her body while he was closing his first major deal. By the time he made it to her bedside, she was already gone. He'd thrown himself into work after that, because work didn't leave you. Work didn't die. "There's someone in the waiting room," the nurse continued, checking her tablet. "Sienna Hayes? She's been here all night." Garrett's chest tightened. She stayed, refused to leave until she knew you were okay. Something cracked open inside him, a wall he hadn't known he'd built. The doctor prescribed 2 weeks of mandatory rest. No screens, no work calls, proper meals, and 8 hours of sleep. Garrett had opened his mouth to argue, to explain that he had a company to run, but the doctor's expression stopped him. "You can rest now, or you can die young. Your choice." When they discharged him the next afternoon, Sienna was still there. She'd gone home to check on her daughter and returned with fresh clothes, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, dark circles under her eyes from her vigil. "You didn't have to come back," Garrett said, his voice rough. "I know." Sienna studied him with those warm brown eyes that seemed to see right through his defenses. "But you need help, Mr. Pierce. And I'm offering. I can hire a nurse." "You can. But will you actually listen to them?" She raised an eyebrow. "I've seen your trash bins. You don't listen to anyone." Despite everything, Garrett almost smiled. "That obvious? You had 17 energy drink cans in your recycling last week." She crossed her arms. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make sure you actually rest. You're going to eat real food. And you're going to let someone take care of you for once." The authority in her voice should have irritated him. Instead, it felt like relief. Sienna arrived the next morning with a whirlwind of energy named Maya. The 5-year-old had her mother's dark curls and an infectious laugh that filled the sterile penthouse with something it had never known, joy. "Mama says you were sick," Maya announced, climbing onto the couch beside Garrett without hesitation. "I brought you my favorite book. It always makes me feel better." Garrett stared at the battered copy of Where the Wild Things Are, something shifting in his chest. When was the last time someone had cared whether he felt better? Sienna set down grocery bags in the kitchen. "Maya, give Mr. Pierce some space." "It's fine," Garrett said, surprising himself. "I'd love to hear the story." Have you ever met someone who changed your perspective on everything you thought mattered? Drop a comment about that moment. Hit subscribe for more stories that restore your faith in second chances. And smash that like button if you're already feeling this connection. Days blended into routines that Garrett had never experienced. Sienna confiscated his laptop on day 2, hiding it in a place she refused to reveal. She limited his phone time to 30 minutes daily, screening his calls with the efficiency of a seasoned executive assistant. "You're worse than Maya at bedtime," she teased one afternoon, catching him trying to sneak emails on his phone. "I'm CEO of a major company," Garrett protested weakly. "And you'll be CEO of nothing if you're dead." She plucked the phone from his hands with decisive finality. "Now eat your sandwich. Real turkey, real bread, actual vegetables." Revolutionary concept. He found himself obeying, charmed by her stubborn care. Mornings became sacred. They'd sit on the balcony with coffee, decaf for him, despite his complaints, while Sienna told stories about Maya's adventures at kindergarten. How she declared herself a scientist after learning about butterflies. How she tried to bring home a stray cat hidden in her backpack. "You're a good mom," Garrett said one morning, watching her face light up talking about her daughter. The compliment caught her off guard. "I try. It's not easy doing it alone." "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Sienna was quiet for a moment, cradling her coffee cup. Construction accident. 2 years ago. Marcus was working on a high-rise downtown when the scaffolding collapsed. He died instantly. Her voice remained steady, but Garrett saw the pain flash across her features. "Left me with a 3-year-old, medical bills, and a nursing degree I was 1 semester from finishing." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "Life keeps moving whether you're ready or not." She met his eyes. "I had Maya depending on me, so I worked. Hospital cafeteria during the day, cleaning at night, catering gigs on weekends. We manage." Garrett thought about his own loss, his mother dying while he chased success. "My mom passed 5 years ago. Cancer. I was closing a deal when she went into hospice. By the time I got there." He couldn't finish. Sienna reached across the small table and squeezed his hand. The gesture was simple, but it sent warmth flooding through him. "I threw myself into work after that," he admitted. "Easier than feeling anything." "I understand that," she said softly. "But eventually, you have to let yourself feel. Otherwise, you're just surviving, not living." Her words lodged somewhere deep in his chest. Afternoons had their own rhythm. Sienna would curl up in the armchair with a mystery novel, while Garrett finally cracked open the books that had sat untouched on his shelves for years. Gifts from his mother he'd never had time to read. Maya would play quietly with her dolls, occasionally demanding that Garrett voice one of the characters, which never failed to make Sienna smile. Evenings were for cooking. Sienna insisted on teaching him to make real meals, and Maya helped by creating spectacular flour disasters. The first time Garrett really laughed, was when Maya dumped an entire bag of flour trying to measure a cup, covering herself in white powder. "I'm a ghost," she declared, running around the kitchen. The sound of his own laughter startled Garrett. When was the last time he'd felt this light? One rainy Thursday afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled over Chicago, drenching the city in warm rain. The lights were low, and the rhythmic patter against the windows created an intimate cocoon. Maya had fallen asleep on the couch after lunch, tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Garrett and Sienna sat in comfortable silence, watching the rain streak down the glass. The city below disappeared into gray mist. "Why did you come back?" Garrett asked quietly. "That night. You'd already left for the day." Sienna was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I forgot my jacket. But honestly." She turned to look at him. "Something told me to check on you. Call it intuition. Or maybe I just noticed how you were fading and couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I'm glad you listened." He held her gaze, and the air between them shifted, charged with something neither had acknowledged until this moment. Garrett began to see Sienna, really see her. The way she bit her lip when concentrating on a recipe. How she hummed unconsciously while tidying up, filling his space with unconscious melodies. The fierce protectiveness in her eyes when she looked at Maya. The strength it took to carry everything she carried and still show up with a smile. She was beautiful. Not just physically, though he was acutely aware of that now. The curve of her neck, the grace of her movements, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed. But beautiful in the way she moved through the world. Resilient, kind, real, and terrifyingly, he was falling for her. 2 weeks into his recovery, Garrett felt more alive than he had in years. The headaches had faded. His sleep had regulated. But the ache in his chest when Sienna smiled at him, that only intensified. It was a Friday evening. Maya had fallen asleep on the couch after they'd read Where the Wild Things Are 3 times. Her small body curled under a soft blanket, thumb tucked into her mouth. Rain began to fall again, soft and steady, turning the city lights below into watercolor smears of gold and silver. Sienna stood at the window, watching the storm, and Garrett couldn't look away. She changed from her usual practical clothes into something softer, a deep blue sweater that made her skin glow, jeans that hugged curves he'd been trying not to notice. Her hair was down for once, dark waves cascading past her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. She smiled without turning. "Just thinking how different this is from my apartment. Maya, and I can't see anything but the building next door. Sometimes I wonder what it's like to have this view every day." "Lonely," Garrett admitted. "It was lonely. Before you." Sienna turned to face him then, and the space between them felt electric. They were close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and sweet. Close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "Garrett," she began, but he couldn't let her finish. "Why did you really come back that night?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "The truth." She swallowed hard. "Because I'd been watching you disappear for months. Every time I came here, there was less of you. Like you were fading. And I couldn't." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." The confession hung between them, fragile and honest. "Tell me to stop," Garrett murmured, his hand rising to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Tell me this is a bad idea, and I'll step back right now." Sienna's breath hitched. Her eyes searched his, and he saw his own longing reflected there. The weeks of tension, of stolen glances, of touches that lingered too long. Instead of speaking, she leaned in. Their lips met, and the world tilted. The kiss started tentative, a question being asked and answered. Soft, exploring, tasting. Then Sienna's hand slid up his chest to his shoulders, and something inside Garrett snapped. He deepened the kiss, pulling her closer, years of isolation and loneliness melting away in the heat of her mouth. She gasped against his lips, and he swallowed the sound, his fingers tangling in her hair. Her nails dug into his shoulders through his shirt, sending electricity racing down his spine. The kiss turned hungry, desperate, like they were both starving and had finally found sustenance. When they broke apart for air, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "Sienna, don't think," she whispered, her voice thick with desire. "For once, just don't think." He didn't need to be told twice. Garrett scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than expected, fitting against him perfectly. She let out a small laugh of surprise, then silenced it by pressing her mouth to his neck, teeth grazing his pulse point. The sensation nearly buckled his knees. He carried her down the hallway, past the spot where he'd collapsed 2 weeks ago, the moment that had changed everything. Into his bedroom, where moonlight and city glow filtered through the windows, painting everything in silver and shadow. They tumbled onto the bed, together, a tangle of limbs and wanting. Garrett's hands found the hem of her sweater, and she raised her arms, letting him peel it away. Her skin was warm silk beneath his palms. He traced the curve of her waist, the dip of her spine, memorizing every inch. Sienna worked at his shirt buttons with trembling fingers, pushing the fabric from his shoulders. Her hands explored the planes of his chest, nails dragging lightly across his skin in a way that made him groan. She smiled against his mouth, a wicked, knowing smile that undid him completely. "You're beautiful," he whispered, trailing kisses down her throat, across her collarbone lower. She arched beneath him, fingers threading through his hair. "So are you," she breathed, and pulled him back to her mouth. They took their time, learning each other through touch and taste. Garrett mapped her body with reverent attention, the sensitive spot behind her ear that made her shiver, the curve of her hip that fit his hand perfectly, the way she gasped when he kissed the inside of her wrist. Every discovery felt sacred. Sienna was equally thorough, her hands and mouth exploring him with an intimacy that went beyond physical. When she looked at him, really looked at him in the dim light, he felt seen in a way he'd never experienced. Not as the CEO, not as the success story, but as Garrett. Just Garrett. Vulnerable and wanting, and completely hers in that moment. When they finally came together, it was with a synchronicity that felt inevitable. Slow at first, savoring, their eyes locked as they moved. Garrett watched emotions play across her face, pleasure, wonder, something deeper that made his chest ache. Her name fell from his lips like a prayer, and she answered with his, breathless and beautiful. The rhythm built, urgency taking over. Nails on skin, whispered words, the sound of their breathing filling the room. When release came, it crashed over them both, leaving them clinging to each other, trembling and spent. In the aftermath, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled of them both. Sienna's head rested on Garrett's chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns across his ribs. His arm wrapped around her bare shoulders, holding her close, afraid she might disappear if he let go. His heart beat steady beneath her ear, strong, alive, hers. "What happens now?" Sienna whispered into the darkness, voicing the question they both felt. Garrett pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her temple, then her lips, soft and lingering. "Everything," he promised. "Everything." But even as he said it, as he held her in the peaceful darkness, fear began to creep in at the edges. What had he done? What happened when morning came? He pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on the woman in his arms, the warmth of her skin, the rightness of this moment. For now, that was enough. For now. Dawn broke over Chicago with unforgiving clarity. Garrett woke to pale morning light filtering through the windows, and the first thing he felt was Sienna's warmth pressed against him. She was still asleep, her face peaceful, dark hair spilled across his pillow. Beautiful. Perfect. Terrifying. Panic hit him like ice water. What had he done? She worked for him. The power dynamic alone was problematic. She had a daughter to think about, a life he could complicate. He had a company, a reputation, shareholders who'd question his judgment. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Harassment allegations, tabloid headlines, everything he'd built crumbling because he couldn't control himself. The walls he'd spent years constructing slammed back into place, brick by brick. By the time Sienna stirred awake, Garrett was already showered and dressed in a crisp white button-down and slacks armor. He stood by the coffee maker, hands wrapped around a mug, jaw tight. "Good morning," Sienna said softly, appearing in the doorway wrapped in his robe. Her smile was shy, hopeful, and it made his chest ache. "Morning." The word came out clipped, formal. Her smile faltered. She studied him, the rigid posture, the careful distance he put between them. "Are you okay?" Garrett forced himself to meet her eyes, even as everything in him screamed to look away. "We need to talk about last night." The hope in her expression dimmed. "Okay. It was a mistake." The words tasted like poison, but he forced them out. "I wasn't thinking clearly. The recovery, the proximity. I took advantage of the situation, and I'm sorry." Sienna's face went very still. "You took advantage?" "I'm pretty sure I was a willing participant, Garrett." "That's not what I mean." He set his coffee down too hard, the sound sharp in the quiet. "You work for me. You have Maya to think about. I have responsibilities, a company, complications you don't need in your life. So that's it." Her voice remained steady, but he heard the tremor beneath. "One night and you're done? Back to being Mr. Pierce, the untouchable CEO. It's better this way." He couldn't look at her anymore. "Cleaner." "I don't do relationships, Sienna. I'm married to my work. You've seen that. Last night it was incredible, but it can't happen again. I won't drag you into my mess." "Your mess." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean your life? God forbid someone actually get close to you, right? Easier to push everyone away than risk feeling something real. The accuracy of her words made him flinch. I'm trying to protect you. No. Sienna's voice turned sharp. You're protecting yourself. I see you, Garrett. I saw you that night on the floor, terrified and alone. I saw you these past weeks, learning to be human again. And last night, her voice caught. Last night, I thought I saw someone brave enough to let someone in. Sienna, you're right about one thing. She straightened, gathering her dignity like a cloak. I do have Maya to think about, which means I can't waste time on someone too scared to take a real risk. She deserves better. And honestly, so do I. The words hit harder than any accusation. Garrett stood frozen, watching her walk toward the guest bathroom where she'd left her clothes. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her, to take it all back, but fear kept him rooted in place. When she emerged 10 minutes later, dressed in yesterday's clothes, her eyes were dry but red-rimmed. She collected her purse with mechanical precision, not looking at him. Sienna, I'm sorry. Don't. She held up a hand. I'll finish out the month. Professional courtesy. After that, I'll send someone else from the agency. You don't have to quit. Yes, I do. Finally, she met his eyes, and the pain there nearly broke him. I can't be around you and pretend last night didn't happen. I'm not built that way. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. Garrett stood in his pristine penthouse, the space that had felt like home for 2 weeks, and it was a tomb again. He'd done the right thing, the smart thing, protected them both from inevitable complications. So why did it feel like he'd just made the worst mistake of his life? Weeks crawled by in excruciating slow motion. True to her word, Sienna finished the month, arriving precisely at 7:30 and leaving at 10:30. Their interactions became coldly professional. No more shared meals. No more stories about Maya. No more warmth. A different cleaner took over in November, efficient, invisible, exactly what Garrett thought he wanted. He threw himself back into work with savage intensity. 80-hour weeks. Expansion deals. A new office in San Francisco. His board applauded his renewed focus. His bank account grew. The emptiness inside him deepened. He dated occasionally. Women from his circles, polished and appropriate. None of them laughed like Sienna. None of them challenged him. None of them made his sterile penthouse feel like home. The relationships fizzled before they began. Meanwhile, Sienna pushed through her own pain. Extra shifts at the hospital, new cleaning clients, anything to stay busy and not think about warm hands and whispered promises. Maya asked once why they didn't visit the nice man with the pretty apartment anymore. Sienna had no good answer. Then, 6 weeks after that morning, Sienna's world tilted again. She woke feeling nauseated, a wave of dizziness that sent her rushing to the bathroom. Food smells made her gag. Exhaustion dragged at her constantly. At first, she blamed stress and overwork, until she realized she was late. 2 weeks late. Her hands shook as she bought 3 pregnancy tests from 3 different stores, as if that would somehow change the results. In her tiny bathroom, while Maya watched cartoons in the living room, Sienna watched 3 pink lines appear. Positive. All 3. No, she whispered. No, no, no. But the tests didn't lie. The ultrasound a week later confirmed it, and revealed something else entirely. Ms. Hayes, the technician said, eyes wide on the screen. I'm seeing 2 heartbeats. You're having twins. The room spun. Sienna stared at the grainy image showing 2 tiny forms, 2 fluttering heartbeats, and felt her world reshape around them. Garrett's twins. Subscribe now, drop a like, and comment below, because what happens next will shatter you. If you were Sienna, pregnant with twins, heartbroken and alone, would you tell him the truth or protect your peace and walk away? I'm reading every answer. She thought about calling him. Her finger hovered over his contact in her phone a dozen times. But every time, she remembered his words. Mistake, complications, can't happen again. Pride and fear made her decision. She would do this alone. Carrying twins was brutal from the start. By her second trimester, Sienna's petite frame struggled under the weight of 2 growing babies. The morning sickness never ended. It evolved into all-day nausea that left her weak and dizzy. Her feet swelled so badly she could barely stand for her hospital shifts. The doctors called it a high-risk pregnancy and warned her to take it easy. Easy. As if she had that luxury. She pushed through until 28 weeks, when her body finally gave out. Severe preeclampsia sent her blood pressure skyrocketing. The doctor's orders were absolute: complete bed rest or risk losing the babies. Sienna had to quit both jobs. Her savings evaporated within weeks. The hospital cafeteria position went to someone else. Her cleaning clients found replacements. Maya, now 6 years old, watched her mother with worried eyes. Too young to understand, but old enough to sense the fear. "Is the baby going to be okay, Mama?" she'd ask, curling beside Sienna on the couch. "They're going to be perfect," Sienna would promise, praying it was true. The community rallied. Her church brought casseroles. Neighbors helped with Maya's school runs. A crowdfunding page covered some medical bills. But pride tasted bitter. Sienna had always been the one helping others, not asking for help. At 33 weeks, on a frigid January night, everything went wrong. Sienna woke to stabbing pain and sheets soaked with blood. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and Maya's terrified crying as a neighbor held her back. In the operating room, under harsh lights and urgent voices, they performed an emergency C-section. 2 tiny, barely 3-pound babies emerged. Silent. Too silent. "Why aren't they crying?" Sienna's voice broke as they rushed the babies away. The NICU became Sienna's second home. Noah and Lily. She'd chosen the names during those long bed rest weeks, names meaning rest and purity. Hoping for peace they'd never known. Fought for every breath. Tubes snaked from their miniature bodies. Monitors beeped constantly. Noah had underdeveloped lungs. Lily's heart had an irregular rhythm. Every day, Sienna sat between their incubators, one hand in each warming box, talking to them through plastic barriers. Maya would visit after school, pressing her small hands against the glass. "They're so little," she whispered once, tears streaming down her face. "They're fighters," Sienna replied, though terror clawed at her throat. "Like us." There were nights Sienna called Garrett's number, finger hovering over the call button, while machines beeped around her dying babies. She'd imagine his voice, imagine telling him, "You have a son and daughter fighting for their lives. We need you." But then she'd remember the morning he'd called her a mistake, and she'd put the phone away. 5 weeks. That's how long Noah and Lily stayed in the NICU. 5 weeks of breathing tubes and feeding tubes and terrifying monitor alarms. 5 weeks of Sienna living on hospital coffee and prayer. Finally, miraculously, they came home. The first year was a beautiful nightmare. Sienna's small 2-bedroom apartment transformed into Baby Central. 2 cribs occupied her bedroom. There was no space anywhere else. Maya gave up complaining about the constant crying and became the world's most devoted big sister, helping with bottle feedings and diaper changes. Sleep became a myth. The twins never synced their schedules. When Noah finally drifted off, Lily would wake screaming. Sienna survived on 3-hour sleep cycles, her body running on pure determination and love. Money was impossibly tight. Formula for 2. Diapers by the hundreds. Doctor visits for their ongoing health issues. Sienna took on online data entry work during the precious hours both babies slept, her eyes burning with exhaustion as she typed. But there were moments of pure joy. Noah's first real smile at 8 weeks. Lily's giggle when Maya made funny faces. The weight of 2 sleeping babies against Sienna's chest, their heartbeat steady and strong. Proof they'd survived. She thought about Garrett constantly. Saw him in Noah's gray-green eyes, exact replicas of his father's. Heard him in Lily's serious expression when she studied her toys with intense focus. Sometimes she'd search his name online, torture herself with photos of him at tech conferences and charity galas, always alone, always polished and untouchable. Once, she saw him photographed at some society event with a stunning woman in diamonds. The caption called her a rumored romantic interest. Sienna closed her laptop and cried into her pillow, muffling the sound so Maya wouldn't hear. Meanwhile, across the city, Garrett's life expanded in every way except the one that mattered. His company tripled in value. He opened offices in 3 countries. Forbes featured him in a cover story, the cybersecurity king who never sleeps. They didn't know how accurate that was. Sleep still eluded him. But now it was Sienna's ghost that kept him awake. The penthouse remained immaculate and empty. He dated sporadically. Elegant women who fit his world perfectly and left him feeling nothing. After the 3rd relationship fizzled, he stopped trying. Something shifted in him around his 40th birthday. He established the Pierce Foundation, focusing on single-parent scholarships and support programs. When his board questioned the focus, he couldn't explain the compulsion. He only knew he needed to do something meaningful, something that might ease the hollow ache in his chest. The foundation launched a tech incubator program for underprivileged youth. Garrett personally mentored several students, finding unexpected fulfillment in giving back. His therapist, yes, he'd finally started therapy, suggested he was seeking redemption. For what, Garrett couldn't quite articulate. Or wouldn't. 16 months after Noah and Lily's birth, Sienna began rebuilding. The twins were healthier, sleeping better, developing personalities. Noah was adventurous and fearless. Lily was cautious and observant. Both were absolute miracles. Sienna enrolled part-time in community college, determined to finish her nursing degree. Slowly, 1 class per semester while juggling 3 kids and work. But she was doing it. She'd changed physically. Her body was softer, marked by pregnancy and motherhood. Her hair was usually in a messy bun, no time for styling. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from chronic exhaustion. But when she looked at her 3 children, she felt fierce pride. She'd survived. They'd survived. Maya, now 7, asked occasionally about the twins' father. "Where's their daddy, Mama?" "He's not in our lives, sweetheart." Why not? How could she explain? Sometimes grown-ups make complicated choices. But we have each other, and that's what matters. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all she could offer. Then came the invitation that changed everything. The Pierce Foundation's annual charity gala. Sienna was being honored with the Outstanding Achievement Award for maintaining a 4.0 GPA while single-parenting 3 children, including premature twins. Her hands shook, holding the embossed invitation. Garrett's Foundation. Garrett's event. She could decline. Should decline. But the award came with a $5,000 scholarship. Money that would cover an entire semester. Money she desperately needed. "I can handle this," she told her reflection while trying on a borrowed dress the night before the gala. "I'm strong. I've survived worse." The twins babbled from their playpen. Noah banged blocks together while Lily chewed on a stuffed elephant. Both had Garrett's eyes, his expressions, his DNA written across their faces. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a ballroom full of Chicago's elite, holding the children he didn't know existed. Tomorrow, everything would change. Again. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and Chicago's elite. Women in designer gowns mingled with men in $1,000 suits, champagne flutes catching the light. Garrett Pierce stood near the main stage, nodding politely as the foundation director discussed the evening's honorees. He'd given this same speech at a dozen charity events. Smile. Shake hands. Write checks. Feel nothing. But tonight, something felt different. An electricity in the air he couldn't name. Across the room, Sienna Hayes stood frozen near the entrance, her borrowed navy dress suddenly feeling inadequate among the couture. 16-month-old Noah squirmed on her hip, while Lily clung to her other side. Maya, dressed in a pretty pink dress from Target, held tight to Sienna's hand. "You look beautiful, Mama," Maya whispered. Sienna's heart hammered. She could still leave. Make an excuse. Protect herself from. "Ms. Hayes." A foundation representative approached with a warm smile. "We're so honored to have you here. Your achievements are truly inspiring. Come, let me introduce you to some of our board members." No escape now. Sienna allowed herself to be led into the crowd, hyper-aware of every eye that turned their way. The twins drew attention. Two toddlers at a formal gala was unusual. Noah reached for the shiny decorations, babbling excitedly. Lily buried her face in Sienna's shoulder, overwhelmed by the noise and strangers. Then the crowd parted, and she saw him. Garrett stood 20 feet away, mid-conversation with a silver-haired woman, and the air left Sienna's lungs. 2 years hadn't diminished his effect on her. If anything, he was more devastating. A few distinguished gray threads at his temples, his jaw sharper, his presence commanding the room effortlessly. He laughed at something his companion said, and the sound pierced straight through Sienna's chest. Then he turned. His eyes swept the room casually and locked onto her. Time stopped. Garrett's expression went through a rapid transformation. Confusion, recognition, shock. His gaze dropped to the children in her arms, and Sienna watched the color drain from his face. He stared at Noah first, those unmistakable gray-green eyes, the exact shade and shape as his own. Then at Lily, who chose that moment to peek out from Sienna's shoulder, revealing features that were eerily familiar. The woman beside Garrett continued talking, but he'd stopped hearing. His hand went to the table beside him, gripping it for support. Sienna saw the moment understanding hit him. The calculation, 16-month-old twins, timeline matching perfectly with that night. The recognition in their faces, his own features reflected in miniature. The truth slamming into him with devastating clarity. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and the world reduced to just them. Garrett excused himself abruptly, not caring about politeness, and began moving through the crowd. His legs felt disconnected from his body. People tried to stop him, board members, donors, well-wishers, but he barely registered them. His focus was singular. The woman holding 2 babies who had his eyes, his nose, his DNA written across their tiny faces. Sienna's instinct screamed to run, but she stood her ground, lifting her chin even as her heart threatened to break through her ribs. Maya sensed her mother's tension and pressed closer. Sienna. Garrett's voice cracked when he reached them. Up close, she could see he was trembling. His eyes kept darting between her face and the twins, as if trying to convince himself this was real. Are they? She wouldn't make this easy. He'd had 2 years to find her, to wonder, to care. Noah and Lily, 16 months old. 16 months. He did the math again, as if it might change. His eyes glistened. Why didn't you tell me? The question hung between them, weighted with 2 years of silence and pain. Tell you. Sienna's voice remained low but sharp, conscious of the gala continuing around them. You made it abundantly clear I was a complication you didn't need. That night was a mistake, remember? I chose to protect my heart and my children from more rejection. Garrett flinched as his own words came back to haunt him. Sienna, His voice broke completely. He looked at Noah, who stared back at him with curious eyes, his eyes. My God, they're mine. Was there ever any doubt? Her tone carried an edge, but tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. Around them, people were beginning to notice the intense conversation. Whispers started. Garrett didn't care. His entire world had just tilted on its axis. Can I? He reached toward Noah with a shaking hand, then stopped, looking to Sienna for permission. May I hold him? Every protective instinct screamed no. But she saw something in Garrett's expression. Raw vulnerability, desperate longing, and soul-deep regret. Slowly, she shifted Noah toward him. The toddler went willingly, surprisingly, studying Garrett's face with intense focus. Garrett cradled his son for the first time, and something inside him shattered and reformed simultaneously. Noah reached up and patted Garrett's cheek, feeling the wetness there. Sad? Noah asked in his limited vocabulary, tilting his head exactly the way Garrett did when puzzled. A broken laugh escaped Garrett's throat. No, buddy. Not sad. He couldn't find words. He looked at Sienna, tears streaming freely now, not caring that they stood in a ballroom full of Chicago's elite. I've missed everything. Their birth. First smiles. First words. 16 months of their lives. Yes, you have. Sienna wouldn't let him off easy, even as her own tears began to fall. You missed me being on bed rest, Terrified I'd lose them. Missed their premature birth and 5 weeks in the NICU, fighting for every breath. Missed the first year of midnight feedings and doctor's appointments, and me doing it all alone. Each word hit Garrett like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. The apology was completely inadequate, but it was all he had. Sienna, I'm so. Mama, is that man the twins' daddy? Maya's voice cut through, innocent and clear. The question silenced everything around them. Sienna looked down at her oldest daughter, then at Lily, still clinging to her, then at Noah comfortable in Garrett's arms, as if he'd always belonged there. Yes, sweetheart, he is. Garrett's knees buckled. Right there, in the middle of the ballroom, he sank down, still holding Noah, not caring about the gasps and whispers erupting around them. Board members rushed forward, but he waved them away with his free hand. I was a coward, he said, voice hoarse, looking up at Sienna while Chicago's elite watched. 2 years ago, I was terrified of what I felt for you. So I hurt you. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too afraid to be vulnerable. And you, his voice cracked. You carried my children, nearly died bringing them into this world, raised them alone through everything, and I wasn't there. I will regret that for the rest of my life. Sienna's tears flowed freely now. Garrett, please. He shifted Noah carefully, reaching for her hand with his free one. I know I don't deserve it. I know I have to earn every second you give me. But please, Sienna, let me be their father. Let me be there for you. For all of you. I'll do whatever it takes. Change diapers, midnight feedings, doctor's appointments, everything I missed and everything to come. Just please give me a chance. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Hundreds of eyes watched the scene unfold. Sienna looked at this man who'd broken her heart, now on his knees before her, holding their son and begging for forgiveness. She thought about the past 2 years, the struggle, the loneliness, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep. She thought about Noah and Lily, who deserved to know their father. She thought about the man she'd glimpsed beneath Garrett's armor, the one she'd fallen for before fear consumed him. Could people really change? Mama. Maya tugged her hand. He's crying like you did when the babies were sick. Out of the mouths of babes. Sienna saw it then. The same desperate fear she'd felt in the NICU, the terror of losing something precious. Garrett wasn't just asking for forgiveness. He was terrified she'd say no, that he'd lost them forever. One chance, she whispered finally, and the ballroom seemed to exhale. Don't waste it. Relief crashed over Garrett's face. I won't. I swear I won't. Could you forgive someone who walked away? Comment below what you do. Smash that like button if you're feeling this redemption arc, and subscribe because this family's journey is just beginning. The weeks that followed were transformative. Garrett showed up at Sienna's apartment the next morning at 6 a.m. with coffee, diapers, and a desperate willingness to learn. He was terrible at first, put diapers on backward, couldn't figure out the bottle warmer, looked panicked when both twins cried simultaneously. But he didn't quit. He learned that Noah liked to be bounced, while Lily preferred slow rocking. That they both hated peas, but loved sweet potatoes. That bedtime required exactly 3 books, 2 lullabies, and a nightlight shaped like a moon. He stepped back from his CEO position, appointing a co-CEO and setting boundaries that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. No calls during family time. No emails after 8 p.m. Success was no longer measured in quarterly reports, but in toddler giggles and goodnight kisses. Maya warmed to him quickly, delighted to have someone to play Princess Tea Party with who took it seriously. Garrett attended every school event, his presence drawing stares and whispers, but he didn't care. This was his family. Slowly, carefully, Sienna let him back in, not just as the twins' father, but as something more. They had dinner together, took the kids to the park, stayed up late talking after the children were asleep, rebuilding what had been broken. 6 months after the gala, after bath time, when all 3 kids were finally asleep, Garrett found Sienna on the couch, exhausted but smiling. Hey, he said softly, settling beside her. Hey yourself. He turned to face her, suddenly serious. I need to tell you something. Sienna's heart skipped. Okay. I'm in love with you. I was 2 years ago, and it terrified me. But I'm done being scared. He took her hand. You're the strongest, most incredible person I've ever met. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you and our children. Sienna's breath caught. Garrett. He kissed her, soft and sure, and she kissed back. This kiss was different from their first. No desperation, no fear. Just promise and hope and love, finally brave enough to exist. 2 years later, in the backyard of the home Garrett bought for them, a real house with a yard and rooms for everyone, the Pierce family gathered for a barbecue. 4-year-old Noah chased butterflies, while Lily narrated their capture attempts with serious commentary. Maya, now 11, rolled her eyes at her siblings but couldn't hide her smile. Sienna, pregnant with their 4th child, laughed as Garrett tried to teach Noah how to properly hold a baseball. Daddy, you're doing it wrong. Noah protested. Am I? Show me the right way then, expert. Sienna watched them, her heart so full it ached. This life, chaotic, loud, beautiful, was everything she'd never let herself dream of during those lonely NICU nights. Garrett caught her eye and smiled, that soft smile reserved only for her. He jogged over, pulling her close despite her protest about being sweaty. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? For saving my life. For giving me a second chance. For this. He gestured at their beautiful chaos. She turned in his arms, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Thank you for being brave enough to take it. As the sun set over their garden, Garrett Pierce understood what he'd been chasing all those years. It wasn't wealth or power or recognition. It was this, love freely given, a family built on second chances, and the courage to choose connection over fear. He'd fallen once and nearly lost everything. But Sienna Hayes had caught him, and in doing so, taught him how to truly live. If this story moved you, don't leave without showing some love. Comment below with your thoughts. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that prove love and accountability can coexist. Because everyone deserves a chance at redemption, and real love is always worth the risk.